Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Sage HCM learning series. My name is Steve Tompkins, and today I'm going to talk about learning management within Sage HCM. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to be able to view my browser here. And I do want to point out that we do have assistance in the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post messages in the chat, or if there's any issues, let us know. And in the chat, we'll respond to those and answer those questions and so forth. So should be able to see my browser here. And some of the learning management can happen right here within self-service. We'll get to how that is set up in a moment. But first off, you may have learning that is active or completed right here. So you can see that right there. And then also my team, which would be a manager's view of the learning their employees have taken, and an instructor portal, which would be used for people who are going to be teaching training, but they may or may not be employees. So that's right there. We're also going to be talking about other aspects of learning, which I'm going to include certifications and skills. Those are visible under the career menu here. You'll see a few different things that are available in here, but I'm going to focus on these two here, which are skills and certifications. All right, so that's what's visible in self-service. Now, how do we make it visible? Of course, we need to go into the settings to do that. So that's where I'm going to go right now. Doesn't matter which one I happen to select because it's going to be in the settings. And you can get to the settings as long as you're in admin by clicking the gear in the upper right-hand corner here. All right, and this is where we're going to be focusing here. There are going to be some things that are set up in the code table, so I do want to talk about that. But this is where we're going to do the things we're going to talk about as far as the courses, the skills, and the certifications. So it doesn't really matter which one we talk about because they are kind of all interconnected here. So I do want to just pick one here to start with, and that's going to be the courses. And then I'll talk about certifications and skills as well as the learning paths, because that's something that is part of the courses, and we'll talk about that. So courses is the actual training that we're going to have employees take, whether that is on demand, in other words, it's through the browser and they might watch a video or use a SCORM or AICC or perhaps link off to some other website. And then classroom, it's I don't want to say a misnomer, but it's more like scheduled. It's something where you have an instructor, there's a date and time that's going to be happening, and it's not something the employee can just do anytime. So that's a classroom style. Doesn't mean it's literally in a classroom or even you're meeting together. It could be done virtually, of course, or maybe it's out in a field somewhere and they're doing the teaching. So those are the two different options there. Now let's look into this. I'll pick this one here as an example. So when you create a new course, of course, this is by employer. So in this example, my Iron Nest company, and the code, the name, the type are all required here. The code and the name could match like mine, or perhaps you have a coding scheme here. Maybe it's numeric, alphanumeric, something like that. But you can do whatever you like as far as the code. As I always mention, try to make these things unique, so that if you have multiple ethics courses as an example, what makes them different, you'll probably want to use the code and or name to make them unique. The two different types here. So classroom, as I mentioned, that's going to be like at a scheduled date and time, and then on demand is one that I can just do at any time through my browser. All right, so the duration, not a requirement, but if you do want to say how long it should take, so let's say this SCORM file should take about 30 minutes to do. If I were to sit down, watch the video, and do all this stuff, about 30 minutes. Maybe, for an on-demand, this might be the minimum amount of time, because certainly somebody might start the course and, they get pulled away and they come back later. And then again, they get pulled away. It may take several days or even weeks to complete an on-demand thing. So this may not be something you put for the on-demand, but for classroom style, you're going to meet for 30 minutes in this room or online or whatever it happens to be. So that might be more appropriate. All right, the enrollment here. So the enrollment, we have two options, open and restricted. And what that means is if it's open, that anybody can enroll in this course. We don't have any restrictions as far as employee groups. that's going to stop them from seeing this course as an option to enroll in or for a manager to enroll somebody into. And then restricted, of course, this would mean that it's restricted to people in these employee groups. So maybe this is only for, I don't know, the executives or something like that. So you might have a group over here that you assign this to, and it could be multiple groups. Let's say it's a Jackie and Aussie and salaried. So those two groups would be able to enroll in this one. All right, so just to see what that's like there, max enrollment, this is kind of like the duration in that it's typically for a classroom. Maybe you've got a maximum size of the room and you can't have, 200 people enrolling in a small little room. So you might have a max enrollment there. This is not a requirement. Now, sometimes I've seen where online training, if you buy training from a third party, they might sell a certain number of licenses to that training. And so that might be what your max enrollment is. You've only bought 20 licenses, you only have 20. So that might be useful in that situation. All right, in order to use this, it needs to be active. So when you come in here, make sure this is checked off if you want to use that. The creation date, that is a required field, but it doesn't really matter what's there, I've found. It just maybe helps you to know which ones have been around for a while and things like that. So, it could be today, it could have been 6 years ago, whatever you're doing there. Now, for the type when it's on demand, this is very important that we tell it what the content type is what we're linking to or uploading for the employee to take. So AICC and SCORM, those are two file types that are specifically designed for training. And many of us may have taken these types of training before where you watch a video, you read something, maybe there's quizzes, and there could be several of those things. And, eventually you complete the training. Usually those are using AICC and SCORM. Now, I do know there are other file types that are out there. Right now, these are the two that we support. They're the most popular. They take up a majority of the market. Now, file could be another type of file. Maybe maybe you have a zip file. Maybe you have a video. Maybe you've got, I don't know, a PowerPoint or something like that. Could just be a file there. And then, of course, a URL would be, website address. So you would put that here in that URL box. You notice how it changed there. All right. So however you might want to have that there. Now, when you choose the content type of AICC file or SCORM, you must upload a file because it's, you're telling you're uploading a file, so that's required. And of course, if I do a URL, the URL is required. All right, now the source, if you want to have sources here, I apologize. If you want to have sources here, you can. I don't happen to have any, but maybe you have different providers and you want to add content sources here. Now, this is in the code tables. However, you may know that in many drop-down menus, you can click this little gear to open up the code table specific to that drop-down, and you can add codes directly in here. So let's just say we got this from Steve's Online Learning. So go out here, Steve's Online Learning, and I'll use that as my code and description as an example, and might add that in there. This would be immediately available to use in the dropdown. I don't need to refresh or anything like that. If I want to go to the code table itself and maybe add several of these in the code table versus adding them here, I, of course, could do that. And so now that new value would be available there. This is not a requirement, but perhaps you want to keep that information there. All right, so down here, again, we have some more optional fields. You don't need to use these. So complete in. So how long do they need to complete this in? So once I assign it to somebody, maybe they have 30 days to complete it. And so you might put 30 in there as an example. So you can use that if you like. Again, it's just an optional field. Notification days before they need to complete it. So I set it out for 30 days, and maybe a week ahead of time, you say, hey, you need to complete this training. So notification can be sent. And then maybe they're allowed to retake it. So let's say there's a pass-fail type situation and they failed it. They have to wait a certain waiting period before they can retake it. Or, again, maybe it is something that they passed it, but they can only take it every, I don't know, 180 days or something like that. So you might have that out there. Now, speaking kind of on the recurrence here, so very similar to this, but this is that they need to repeat it after a certain number of years. So in this example, starting on November 30th, every year they need to repeat this course. So we see this a lot where, they do a monthly training and it kind of rotates, and maybe they have 24 different training courses. So every 2 years, it just repeats the same courses. So that you want to use that for this. None of these fields are required. You can certainly leave them all blank if you'd like. Now, down here at the bottom, skills and competencies. Now, of course, I haven't talked about setting up skills. So if you came in here for the very first time, had nothing set up, when you click add here, you would not be able to set up any skills because, of course, you don't have any set up. So we'll talk about this. The category, this is another one of those code tables where you might need to set up, those those categories for those skills. I already have some configured here. So I could hit the little blue, gear to do that. And let's just say other miscellaneous skills. And then these skills. Now, this is not one where I can set them up here. I actually have to go to the skills, which we'll talk about in a moment, to set this up. And then what level does this give you? This is one where I can get to the code table. So some of them we can, some we can't. Just depends on where they are. And so let's just say it gives me the satisfactory plumbing skill by taking this ethics course. Kind of strange, but let's just say that's what it was. All right, so an example there. And you can have multiple skills. As you can see, I already have English here, but maybe they learn English and they also learn business ethics and they learn anti-corruption or something like that. So you could have several skills that they learn as a result of taking this course. And then the same type of thing could affect competencies. Now, competencies don't just work in learning management, but that's where they are set up. This is one of those areas, again, where I can't use the little gear. I have to go to the settings to set it up. But you might have a competence here for, ethics or, I don't know what it might be. And as a result of completing this course, they have now received that competency. All right, and finally, we have some buttons up here at the top. So the course material would allow you to add files and or URLs that you want to link to this training. So outside of what you might have set up as part of on-demand, a SCORM or a file or a URL, there may be additional materials. Could be especially useful if you're going to have the instructor use this. So maybe there's a PowerPoint you want to share with the instructor for a classroom training. That's what they're going to use and they're going to present. And then there's a PDF handout that they're going to then share with the employees. So you might put those here. Of course, this is an upload. All right, but I can do a link. So if I had a URL that I'm doing, that video is maybe like a YouTube video or something, I might put the URL there. And then, as I mentioned, I might want to share this with the employee, whether it's a link or a file. I may want to share that with the employee. So when I do this, I give it a name. Let's just say it's called PowerPoint. And I go out there and I find the PowerPoint file that I want to do. So let's just say this learning series slides as an example, and I can add it. All right. And of course, I could delete it if I'm no longer using this, or if I need to change it or something, I could do that. And as I mentioned, I could share with the employee. All right, so that's an example of that. And as soon as you have one there, you'll show a little indicator. There could be several, of course. Maybe you've got 5 or 6 documents. You would see that number there. And then last, but certainly not least, is the description of the course. Now, just calling it ethics doesn't really tell you what's going on. You may want to have a nice long description for this ethics course. So you can type it in here and, of course, use the fonts and so forth that are up here. Maybe you copy and paste it in. Maybe you have a link that goes somewhere. You can use this as the description. So here is a sample description. And then, you put a link over here for Google or something like that. So let's just do this. Say it's for Sage. And then I put a link in there that's going to go to sage.com. All right. So just an example there. Of course, I could have other things. Maybe there's an image I wanted to upload in here or, more text or something like that. I can certainly do that. And then just so you know, if you are really adventurous and you want to get to the HTML, you can go over here and get to the HTML, but you'll see other things you could add to. All right, so I put a description in there. And then this right here would show you the people who have attended it. Of course, if this is brand new, it's going to be blank. But if you've had several people already take this, you can download a list of everybody who's taken this particular course. All right, so it'll run a report and download this report here, and this shows everybody who's taken it. All right, so save that there. So that's how you set up a course. And of course, you can have as many as you like here. If you do have any inactive, you can show those here. I don't. I can make them inactive on here if we're no longer going to do this beginner class, for an example. I might make that inactive, but then I can see it. Anybody who's taken it, it's not going to lose that history. It just means that going forward, nobody's going to be taking that course. This is also something we can import. So let's get over to skills and we'll talk about those. So you saw me add a skill to a course. Here's where you would set them up. Now, the first thing is the category. You don't have to go to the code table to add new categories, but if you had several to set up, maybe you'd want to do that first. But here I could add categories if I need to. You'll see I have several already configured. All right, and let me just pick languages here. Let me just see, I don't know what languages I already have configured. So I've got this. All right, let's just put languages, and then I'm going to put Klingon right there. Maybe I want a longer description than just Klingon. And now I've got that set up. So very easy to set up skills. Again, this is something that you could import in. You could edit some existing ones. Like I'm not sure why this one is blank, so I might want to put something here. It's kind of strange that this is blank. I don't know where this is coming from, but I don't know. That was my chief. Oops, I misspelled chief. Chief bottle washer skill. All right, so I'll just put that in there as fill in the blank. All right, so you can see how you can edit the existing ones if you need to. Maybe like me, you misspelled a word, you need to fix that. You can certainly do that right there. So very easy to set those up. But of course, they get linked to things like courses, and so that's where that goes in. They also go to other places. For an example, you can link them to the positions and in the jobs and so forth, so you can have that in there, and they'll be on the employees. Certifications. So this is a little different than a skill. Certification might be something that's required to do a job. They have to be certified to operate a piece of machinery or to perform a certain task. So it's not just that they have the skill of being a driver, they need to have that certification that proves they can drive that piece of equipment. So we might want to have that in here. And you can see I have several already configured in here. I'll show you adding a new one. Now, when you do a new one here, very similar, type of layout here. We have these three things that are required. And so let's just say forklift driver is the name, and I'm going to use that as the description. This is the default issued by. So, maybe there's an industry, consortium that does the training, and you've got that in here. Of course, if there are several places that they can get a certification, when you say like first aid training, there's a lot of places that offer that. This might be where you find a majority of the people getting that training because you can overwrite this when you add a certification to an employee. So let's just say I'm getting this at Forklift University. All right. So this ties into the courses a little bit here. If I want to, none of these things on the side over here on the right are required, as well as the course is not required. So if you're not teaching the actual course and you're not tracking people taking it even from a third party, you might leave this field at least blank as well as down here. But maybe you do offer training here. This would be the minimum number of courses that are listed down here at the bottom to take before they get this certification. So maybe there's an offering of 3 or 4 different courses. You require them to take at least 2 of them. So you can add those courses down here. This is go and look through your course catalog. And so I might say if they take this ethics course and statistics, I don't know why that would give them a forklift driver, but let's just say that it was that. Those are the 2 that are required for that. All right, so that's if you're doing the training, you're tracking the courses and classes that might go into that. The validity period. So this is going to look at the date that they received it, the effective date, and add this number of years to it to be the expiration date. So let's just say March 5th, 2026, I received this, and I put 3 years here. It's going to show the expiration date as March 5th, 2029. So you can do that. Now, you don't need to do this. Somebody might get a certification that's good for 5 years. Somebody else maybe gets one and it's the same one, but for some reason it's only good for 2 years. So you might want to have them fill that information in. All right, expiration notification and overdue notification. So that is going to look at the expiration dates. And if you would like the system to send notifications to the employee and to their manager and so forth, when it's getting close to expiration, you could fill something in here. So let's just say this certification, it takes a while to get renewed and to get all that information from whoever provides it. Maybe you want to go like 6 months out before it expires and notify the employee about that. So you might say 6 months and then send that notification out. So that might be something you'd like to do there to start notifying them 6 months out. If it's something that is not job required, they just happen to get it and whatever, maybe you don't have a notification for it. But this is for each individual certification. And then overdue. So of course, when it expires, how far after it expires do you want to notify them? Could be right away, like the first day after it expires, you let them know. So one day, as an example there, maybe it's like, okay, well, they're in progress. It takes a little time to get it, notified that it's done. So you give them a week or a month or something like that. So you give those options there. All right. So that's an example of how that works, and you can set those up. Now, I did mention for courses and skills and certifications, this is something that we can import. And I'll go over that here in a moment. But I do want to talk about the last thing here, which is a learning path. This is a series of courses that you might assign to an employee. So I'm going to go into this one called Accounting Group. So you'll see how this works here. So first off, we've got the name of it. In my example, the code is Accounting Group. Of course, this is by employer. So this is the name for this. Now, maybe you're going to say this is business training or something like that. It doesn't necessarily need to be named after like a department. You can call it anything you like there. All right. And the name can match that. So we've got the code in the name. In my example, they do match, but maybe the code here is like ACCT, and then the name is Accounting Group, something like that. Now, this is the group that would get that automatic assignment. So I don't know why Accounting Group is the name and Ticket Sellers is the group, but you certainly could do whatever you want. And it could be multiple groups. It could be the Ticket Sellers and the Sound Quality Assurance Group. Both need to get this training here. All right. And I can also add it manually to people. So if I come in here, I can say, oh, Charlene and Megan and Guadalupe, they all need to take this as well. And so I can add it to them. All right. And then here are the courses that you would add. So of course, they do need to be set up first. Can't add a course that doesn't exist. So once they're set up, then I can go ahead and add them in here to here. And it's just, you'll see the list of courses right there, and you just add them in, one at a time, just not one at a time, like you have to click out, but, add them in like that. Just hit the little down arrow. Of course, if I don't want it, I can remove it from the list there. And of course, if they no longer need to learn about ethics, I can trash can it. All right, so that is a learning path. And now, of course, you can see how these all work together here. The courses get set up. Maybe they get added to a learning path. If somebody's in one of these groups, it assigns the courses to them. They complete the courses. They get the skills and the certifications. So it all is tied together there. And competencies, let's go over those just real quick. So very similar to like the skills in that you have groups and you have names and descriptions. So a group, again, this is a code table, but I can set them up here. The name of it, and then the description is not a requirement, but you can kind of see here, I'll click into one. Teamwork is the competency. Right there, there's the description of that. All right, so that would allow me to put those competencies in the courses if I would like to do that. So that's how that all works together there. Now, the offering of a course that is a classroom style is done through classes. So this is where you're going to say, here's an upcoming version of one of those classroom style courses. And so you can add here. And of course, you're going to see those ones that are set up as classroom. You're not going to see all. You're going to see classroom. So let's say we're doing a new hire orientation, and it's going to be next Monday at, let's say, 10 a.m. So I can just type that in there or use the dropdown. When can I allow people to start registering for it? Well, I'm just going to say today is fine. And I'm even going to say at midnight. So they can start registering right now. Of course, I want to make this active. So I would do that right there. Now, who is the instructor? So when you do this here, this is one of those areas where you might need to add an instructor. First, I already have some set up, so I don't need to worry about that. I'll talk about that in a moment, how you can add an instructor. An instructor can be an employee who's already in system or a third party. All right, and then these other fields are not a requirement, but you may want to say this is in boardroom A, and it's going to cost us $500 to put this on here. The maximum enrollment in this room, let's say it's not very big and only hold 15 people there. And then you may want a review form that they complete upon completing this course. So you can add that there. You have to add the form first. And then the pin is used alongside the URL. So I can put a pin in here. The URL will generate as soon as I hit save. It'll generate a URL, so I can go back in there and get that. And if I want to have a pin to do this, this is very useful when you have those third-party instructors. This is how they log in. All right, now you'll see up here class materials. So the courses have materials, but I can have specific class materials as well. So this is just for this one offering. I might have something like that. So again, it's very similar to the course materials. Then I can add it for the class here. And then the instructor sheet here is going to show the employees that are enrolled in this. So I'm able to see that right here, as well as what they did. And then this would also allow me to download those attendees. All right, let's look at the instructors. As I mentioned, you can have internal, and then you can also have external. So internal, they won't have a company. It's just adding an employee. So I choose internal, and I select the employee who's going to be doing that training. Let's just say this person is that. So it's very simple, just selecting the employee and saving. Now, the phone number would be, I believe it's their business phone number. That's where this comes from. So that's where that is. Now, externals, you got some third party coming in to do that teaching. So they keep that here is their name. So John Smith is going to do this. He's from, I don't know, Training Accelerated. I don't know. I'm just coming up with a name here. And then John at trainingexcel.com. All right. I don't know if that exists. Phone number. Okay. Password. So this is the password that he's going to use to log in to the instructor portal. So I can set that out here. And then, let's go ahead and just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Or I can generate one, but that's now the password there. And I don't need to save that password. And so he's now set up, and this is his URL to log in. So you can share that with him. All right. Now, I actually just realized I should have made myself a one in here. So I'm Julie. Okay. I just want to make sure she's teaching that class so I can show that one out there. The instructor is Julie. That's the person I'm logged in as. Okay. So that's all the setup over here. Let me just talk very briefly about the 2 files you can use to import here. So in your data import, under learning management, we have 2 templates here. One is to do the setup. It says courses by employer, but it's really all those things. And then I'll show you the template here for this. And then there's courses by employee, which would be the template to bring in the employee history. So let me bring up the courses by employer first so you can see what that looks like. In case you've never seen one of our templates before. All right, so you'll see down here, we have all these different sheets. So the first one are the values that are in the system. You don't need to touch these. You shouldn't touch these because this is reading what's in the system here. If I went in and I put down like a learning path here that I didn't have created in the system, you're going to get an error if you try to import that because it doesn't exist. And so they won't add it from these lookup values one. I'd have to add it in the system and then regenerate the template and put it in. All right, so here's where I could do the courses. So all those same fields are here on the spreadsheet, and you'll see the ones that are required are in yellow. Some of these will have a drop down based off of those lookup values. So like the employer and so forth, I can do all that in here. So if you have a whole list of training courses you want to add in, you could use that there. Here would be those classes. So let's say you wanted to make a whole list of new orientations for the rest of the year. It's going to be every other Monday or something like that. You could create all of those ahead of time using an import. Here's where I can do a learning path. So I can create the learning path in there, and then I can load up the courses in here if I'd like. All right, so set up the learning path. Here's all the courses that I could add to it if I want to. Here would be where I can set up the skills. Now, this is another area where if you don't have that category, you need to set it up in the system, in the code tables before you can use it in here, but very simple skill name and description. And then certification is the same thing. I can set those up in here if I need to. Now you'll see it doesn't have as much thing in there like the notifications and so forth. So once you add them through the import, you'd want to go and look at them and edit them there. And then just real quick, I want to show the employee one just to go over that. So this is the employee history. Again, we have lookup values in here. So don't touch these. If you need a course or a certification or a skill that doesn't exist, you got to set it up. And then you can use this one here. So this is where I bring in the history. Now, this is one where you might need a report to find the employee numbers to get them all in there to load that in, and then the course codes and so forth. You can see those columns right there. The certifications, same thing. You need the employee number and then those certification codes. And if you don't see a certification, you got to set that up in the system and then regenerate the template to get that into lookup values. And then skills, the same thing. The employee number, there's the skill name. This one has the level. So you've got different levels there. And of course, the date that they received it. But again, if the skill doesn't exist, you got to create it first. All right, so let me go back to my browser here and let's just kind of wrap this up here. Now you can, of course, use those templates I was just talking about on employees and employer to add information to the system, but I can also manually add information to the system. So I could go to an employee and I could go down to their education and skills and I can manually add skills to somebody. So come in here, select their skill and that level of skill, whatever they have there, the date they acquired it. Very simple to manually enter that information in for the employee. Same thing with certifications. Let's say I get an email and he says, here's my certification for whatever it is. Go ahead and select that one. Let's say CPR, and this is by the Red Cross as an example. And he received it on Monday. I could, of course, upload a copy of the file of that. Maybe they sent me something and I add that. Courses, this would be me assigning a course to them manually. I can also assign a learning path. I could have done this on the learning path, but I can do this here too. So I go out there and say, I'm going to assign this Statistics 101 to you. And, this one actually, let me do one that's not a classroom style. So let's do on demand. This ethics one, I'm going to assign that to you, and you have until the end of the month to complete it. And now that's something he needs to do. Oh, yes. I didn't realize I had a max enrollment in there. I forgot, and I've already exceeded it. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in there. All right, so that's adding those to the employee. And of course, the employee can add these to themselves. So here's their certifications. So it's here under certifications. They could add it, same fields, except for you may have a workflow approval for them to add a certification. Same thing with skills. You may have a workflow approval for them to add the skill. And this is manually adding it, not going through the training. So that's how they could add those there. And of course, to do the training, they're going to go to active, to any active training that they have. And it seems like I need to do legal quite a few times, so it's already there. But here's this one now. I don't know if this will work. I don't remember, if I have a file out there or whatever. But if it is one of those ones with the file, then I can resume it here or start it. And then I can go out there. You'll see here's that description with that link as an example. And then I can launch the training right here. This may give me an error. I don't have it linked in my actual data. So you probably won't see that error if you uploaded it correctly. So there's that there. And then the classroom one, just to go over that very quickly. If I'm an instructor, I can see what training is out here. So here's that new hire orientation in Boardroom A next Monday. This would show my attendees. Now, maybe the accounting or the HR team already assigned everybody to me. So I'd see them here. Maybe it was assigned as part of onboarding. So I'd see that. But I can also add attendees. So I can find somebody out there and hopefully I have somebody named John and add him to, this right here. All right. And then once the course is over, I can select one or more employees and I can update them right here. So I want to change their completed status to completed. Of course, for one employee, it's not too bad to do that. But if I had a list of 20 employees or 15 in this example, maybe I need to go and update all 15 of them. All right, so that would allow me to do that mass update of those. So if I now went to John, I would see that he had completed this course. If there are skills and certifications related to it, they would have been added for him. Okay, so thank you for going into overtime with me. There's a little bit more to cover than I could get done in 30 minutes, but let's go over what's coming up in the future here. So where's my PowerPoint? Okay. So here's our upcoming schedule of events. We're going to go to payroll in 2 weeks and talk about processing payroll and the steps involved with that, the various reports and exports you can run, and how that all works. Okay, and then about a month from now, beginning of April, we're going to talk about performance reviews. How do you set up the templates? How do you do those types of things in the system, setting up the rating scales and everything? So we'll cover that at the beginning of April. We're going to cover a new thing that we added in the last release, which is referral bonuses. We'll go into detail on how those are configured and used in the recruiting of new employees. And then we are going to revisit surveys. We've made a number of changes to surveys since the last time. And so we're going to revisit that at the end of April to make sure that everybody is up to speed on what we've been up to with the changes to surveys. All right, so thank you for joining us today. I didn't see any questions that came through the chat, but if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to support. You can click on the help in the system, email or call us, submit a ticket if you have any questions about learning management. If you're working with a partner, of course, you can reach out to your partner. They will be able to help you out with those types of things. And I want to thank you one more time for joining us, and I hope to see you all again in a few weeks.